You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
You've done it again, folks. You're monitoring guard.
Welcome back to another episode of the 21.5 podcast, the podcast for professional pilots by two professional pilots that aren't flying a lot. But.
Yeah. Well, I've been flying a little bit, actually. And I feel like there's been some karmic justice for me. Do you remember last episode when I went on a rant about Heber Airport?
Mm-hmm.
And you know how I was uncontrolled and the delays, and I was just like, I've just had it with this. Yeah. So since then, I have now run into two scenarios where I've had to fly at an unexpected, uncontrolled airport just to get back at me, to teach me a lesson, show me how good I have it. First one, earlier this year, did you hear about the Orange County John Wayne SNA tower closure for like multiple days?
The whole tower had the Rona?
Apparently. I don't know. So they closed the tower, but the airport was still open. And that was quite an experience going in there, because you've got SoCal working hard to sequence everybody, and there's no tower. They closed the little runway, so there's only one runway there. So now GA, everybody's trying to go in and out on this one runway. And the crazy thing about Orange County is, you know, there are plenty of uncontrolled airports that we fly to in business aviation, but what you don't see much is airliners at uncontrolled airports, especially like, you know, mainline carriers. So that was a real treat to watch that. You've got, you know, American 737s holding on the localizer, trying to, you know, make position reports.
Are they just butchering the position reports?
It was, you know, the one thing I'll tell you that's nice about in-flight Wi-Fi, I think we were maybe talking about this earlier in another episode.
Is everything?
Well, yeah.
Besides that?
Yeah. But what was nice for us is being able to pull up the traffic, you know, on like ForeFlight, I can see the traffic.
Right. Sure.
So you could see what's out there waiting to get in, you know, so as we were like an hour out, you could be like, okay, well, how many airplanes are stacked up here trying to get in?
Why did they close the runway? I guess I'm thinking back in my head. Have you ever been to an uncontrolled airport with parallel runways? Like there's all kinds of uncontrolled airports with multiple runways, but parallel runways?
No, not off the top of my head.
I mean, it's like always uncontrolled.
I'm sure there's someone, one of our listeners will write us into the really
but
obvious.
I wonder why they would do that when they know there's a bunch of GA at John Wayne. Like, I guess.
I mean, because I guess they would. I don't know.
There's a big risk of runway incursion there too. You know, when it's like short of Lima and cross the runway and hold short of the other runway and you're hanging out. That's part of the problem too. Is in the airliners, when you hold short of 20 right, you're not clear of 20 left.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I guess that makes sense.
So anyways, coming in, we got lucky that we didn't have to wait that long to get in. We land, you know, taxi into the FBO, not a big deal. Going out, different story. Airplanes lined up. And so it's really weird. What happened is you'd go out and you'd kind of wait in the conga line, not that big of a deal, until you're number one. And then you call SoCal when you're number one. And you're like, all right, we're number one, ready to go. And then they give you your clearance and everything. And then they'd be like, all right, hang on, just wait. We'll call you back. And then they call us back. We could see a guy on final a few miles out. And they go, okay, you guys are released. And you get a 1 minute void time. And I look, and I'm like, I'm looking at this guy on final. I'm like, I don't think he's going to be touched down in a minute. And I'm like, but this guy, the SoCal's got to know that this guy's on final. And I'm just like, so I called him back. I'm like, I said, okay, you know, void time. I'm like, there's a guy that's, you know, about to touch down. We'll go after him. And it was just bizarre. I've never seen anything like it. And I can't imagine. I'd love to talk to an airline pilot that had.
Well, they did that at Vegas. Remember at McCarran?
Yeah.
A while back. Everybody's running there uncontrolled, which had to be a real treat.
Yeah. So that was strike one. That was to make me repent about my Heber rant. Strike two happened today. Coming into Sky Harbor, as you know, it was a very cold and rainy day today, but the weather actually got really good here in Phoenix when we came in. we're coming in on the arrival, same thing. And they go, hey, there's smoke in the control tower. So we think they might have to evacuate, guys. So just be ready to hold. And they told us and an Alaska Airlines. And okay. And he goes, we think somebody burned a burrito in the microwave.
That's what they said on the radio?
What they said on the radio. I'm like, okay, well, this isn't going to be a big deal. But we slowed way down, and we're getting ready to hold. We had a bunch of gas, so it wasn't going to be a huge deal. And then about 5 minutes later, the approach comes on and he goes, yeah, they're going to go ahead and evacuate.
Oh my God. Did you ask him if it was in fact a burrito?
Yeah.
Can we get confirmation on the burrito, please?
Was it breakfast or more of like a bean and cheese?
What kind of tortilla are we talking?
So anyways, we're like, all right, he goes, it should be about 20 minutes. We're not sure. And then the approach controller comes on and he goes, you can tell like he wasn't even really familiar with how to word it, but he's like, there would be no control tower, but would you guys be able to accept a visual approach with no control tower? We're like, yes. Okay. And then it was like this had never happened before. So
now, sir, who's going to clear us to land though? Is that going to be you? You should. Well,
no. Okay. So here's the funny thing. Like if anyone's ever been into Sky Harbor, there's like a, very common with these big airports, you got a north complex and a south complex, different tower frequencies for each one. So I asked the guy I'm flying with, I'm like, what would be the frequency we would use here? And I'm like, well, I'd probably just use the South Tower complex, even though that's probably not the dedicated Unicom or whatever. So he goes, I don't know, we should just check with approach. So I checked with approach and I was like, hey, what frequency do you want us to make position reports?
He's like, I don't know.
He goes, we were just talking about that. I don't know. He goes, maybe we're going to look it up. Maybe Unicom. And I mean, they just didn't know.
Pick one, dude.
And I'm like, all right, well, we're just going to use the tower frequency on the south side. And then, okay, great. Yeah. So, we go and make our position reports. We're following an airliner. Zero position reports, zero anything.
It's just coming in
hot.
I
was surprised that they were even allowed.
Nothing.
The Alaska airplane that was in front of us just held. I don't think they were interested in landing. So, anyways,
what do you mean?
I don't know. I don't know if they could. I don't know if they're ops.
Yeah, we're not really interested in landing tonight, so we're just gonna hang out.
One way or another, this will sort itself out. So
all I know is we're getting paid overtime here. So
so we had the airport in sight and everything, and we canceled in the air like on the base leg. And
wait, you canceled IFR?
Yeah, because we were trying to help them out because there's a lot of other traffic.
Did you cancel pending a VFR clearance in Class B airspace?
No, but we had already established radio contact, and we were talking to the guy.
You have to specifically have a clearance in the Class B airspace if you're
that's
VFR.
That's a good question. All right, we're going to
have to delete this. Have you ever heard that whole thing? I remember that back in college.
Yeah. All right, we're going to delete that. This is all a hypothetical story.
I remember Riddle. I'd like to cancel IFR pending a VFR Class B clearance.
Yeah,
that was a big thing.
I remember for a while. I think I just incriminated myself. Yeah. I'll tell say the tail number will be in the show notes. So, anyways, I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, so we canceled. We're coming in. We taxi in, and make their calls and whatever. Clearly active. We taxi in, and the Alaska Airlines guy that's holding. We're parked. He comes on the radio as we're like chalking in the FBO, and he goes, "Hey, Challenger, did you forget to cancel your IFR?" I'm like, no, we canceled in the air. He goes, oh. But thank you.
So are you considering landing now, sir, or are you just going to continue to hold?
You're just going to continue to hold IFR? So, and it was just weird. I've never heard that. I get like when all the business aviation airplanes are doing it to like help each other out at certain like, have you ever heard that at like Hayden?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Where everyone cancels or you blast off VFR. If you don't have to take off IFR.
Yeah. There's all sorts of stuff. This guy, I think I don't know. He turned into Overwatch, just orbiting the airport.
Could you hear him? Hey, Chuck, watch this.
Yeah.
Hey, Challenger, did you forget to cancel your...
He's the eye in the sky, just orb. That's why he held. He was going to
just... He must have been an old E2 guy or something.
It's like, I'll just control this airport.
I got days in the Air Force.
I could see the burrito smoke coming out of the tower. I've got this.
A burrito situation.
Folks from the flight deck, here's a little airport cancellation closure down below. We're going to be
Phoenix has a little bit of a smoking burrito situation. We're monitoring from the air and
to a tactical support role here for the next 45 minutes. I hope none of you are going to be
the captain in the Air Force 20 years ago used to control traffic, so everything's under control. Just sit back, relax.
If you
Cocktails are on us.
If you look down at the white Challenger texting into the FBO, he's forgotten to close his flight plan. We'll be handling this.
Anybody sees him, tell him to go give us a call.
1-800-WX brief. So anyways, I don't know.
Souped and over.
I don't know. 2021's been a weird year in the air so far.
Whoever that was, thank you, Alaska.
Yeah, so thank you.
Keeping
I mean,
this guy
no,
safe.
seriously, I appreciate it. You know what? I'd much rather have somebody say, hey, did you forget to, like, if I actually had forgotten to...
Well, yeah, how many times does that happen? Hey, can you see a hawker on the ground?
Yeah,
if they cancel,
exactly.
we can't let anybody
Yeah.
in until he cancels.
No.
They're in the call. Remember, I've heard him call the
yeah.
FBO. The FBO was like, hey, is there a Challenger 80?
Yeah, right, I know.
Juliet Foxtrot?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so thank you for double checking me. I'll tell you what my move is to remember to cancel. Do you have a technique?
No, I don't.
This is just a technique, not a procedure. Yeah. Anytime I want to remember something, like if I'm
Technique only.
doing a cross flow in the fuel or closing a flight plan, I put my watch on my other arm. That drives me nuts. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that just bugs me so much that I'll just constantly be like, get this thing off. And then,
What? So
like if you're doing,
cross-feeding fuel and
Yeah.
canceling a flight plan. What else?
like when my wife's birthday is like a week out.
You wear
I'll
your
put on-
watch
yeah, and just,
every day.
every day, just like, okay, gotta get that card.
Just like it's not annoying enough that
Yeah.
it's their birthday, and then
Right.
you have to do that to yourself.
Exactly. So anyway, so that's my tales from the sky. They're not that exciting.
Well,
but
shame on you for hating on Heber. There you
I
go.
know. So I'm back to, I'm just not going to publicly diss any more airports. A public apology issued to everybody. So we survived. All right. Today's episode, Max, we had to go back to one of our favorites. James Onieal called in. We had some flight advice he answered for us. And it turned out that we ended up, surprise, ended up having an hour conversation with him, which was pretty good. So we're just like, all right, well, I guess that's the episode for this week. But
It was the perfect bit of flight advice for James to address.
yeah. So
Sometimes you got to leave it to the professionals.
yeah. So we had a really good conversation with James, which we will get to in a little bit. Hopefully he'll be helping out one of our listeners. Before we get to that, though, I want to talk more about this giveaway that we're doing. Remember that our friends at Airfare Snacks sent us from those snack bags.
time.
Yeah. So we're going to give that bag of snacks, a couple pouches probably, to one of our listeners. All you got to do is write a review for the show. I like it when you do it on Apple, just because that's the biggest one. And you just go in there and say, hey, Dylan and Max provide mediocre content, questionable professional credentials, and it's fine. I download, but don't listen. That's all we really...
I'm just here for the snacks, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That'd probably do it for.
So we'll pick one of those comments at random and then send it out to somebody that can get it out to it. And that'll be great. Thanks for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. And I want to read a text message to you before we get going today. It made me start to think for a second. Let me get that. This came from my old man, Tom, who's been on the show before. He was our airport apostle. As you remember, when prior to COVID, whenever
Super
he'd
fan.
travel, would pass out business cards and
Hunt down pilots in the airport.
pilots.
That's the best.
You know what I should do is just tell him that, you know how the worst part is when you're in uniform at the terminal and then everyone hunts you down, but all the questions just like, where's the bathroom?
Yeah.
How do I should just have him pivot to that. It'd be even funnier. That's a good opener. But anyway, he sent me a text message this morning and he said, I poked myself in the eye with my surgical mask yesterday morning. The pain got so bad, I went to the ER last night around 11, some sort of cornea abrasion. I'm currently at the eye doctor getting it looked at. I'm serious. He sent me this message. And you know
That was it?
You know what the first, I know, yeah.
It was just to bring attention to the situation, just to let you know.
We had a conversation about it and I was like, I hope
right.
you're okay, Dad. But
Go ahead.
It got me thinking. Those stupid eyeballs are so fragile, and we have everything in our career hanging in the balance with those eyes, you know? I think you know where this is going.
Is this a public safety announcement for using safety glasses or something?
Well, listen, yeah, of course you should. Obviously, I always wear safety glasses for
operating
every
at-
flight. Yeah.
Angle grinder?
Yeah, anything, flying an approach into Phoenix with burrito smoke. But no, I mean, life is fragile. you got to protect yourself. And especially an eyeball, man, you do the wrong, put a mask on wrong or something.
How do you do that? That's the real question here.
I don't know. But my point is, you got to protect yourself against that. And our friends at Harvey Watt provide some of the best coverage to do that. Actually, some of the only coverage.
Great point, Dylan.
Yes.
I see where you're going now.
Yeah. So that was the first thing I thought about. I was like, man, what if I did that? Damaged my eye permanently.
Did something like that and was literally working on something in the shop and shot a piece of metal into his eye.
Yeah.
That could be game over right there.
I know. That's what I was thinking, because, you know, a lot of times you think loss of medical, your heart or something weird. But it could be just something as simple as your kid poking you in the eye or a mask somehow.
You know what else is interesting? I was just reading today in an email where the question was, what does the FAA have to say about pilots and when they can fly again if they've had and recovering from COVID? And the basics were that there's really no guidance that says, you know, if you have recovered and then you do the I'm safe checklist and you should be good to go, unless you've been in the ICU as a result of it. And then they say you shouldn't fly and they'll probably defer your medical, but they haven't really figured out what the implications might be. But that's another time too where Harvey Watt, not only just for the insurance aspect, but also the utilizing them as a resource with the medical advisory board and asking them those questions. See, like, hey, I'm laid up.
Yeah.
How do I know when I can fly? Beyond just quarantining and the CDC requirements, et cetera. So,
yeah, do not get your information from amateur podcast hosts. When it comes to that. But go to the pros. Our friends at Harvey Watt, longtime sponsors of the show. And just another reminder for, real world reminder for me. So HarveyWatt.com for all the information. They provide life insurance, loss of medical insurance. Go check it out. Max, time for more flight advice. Special guest edition. We're bringing in the expert. Our old friend James Onieal is joining us from Raven Careers. Welcome, James.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Got some flight advice from a listener. What do we got, Max?
Dylan and Max, I'm a recently furloughed pilot from a regional airline after being employed for about a year. I'm now in the interview process for a corporate position, partly due to your advice from the show, and just got my recall notice because of the federal assistance that was approved. My airline has me scheduled for a training event and then a check ride, but my obvious worry is that this will be a very short-term recall and potentially put this corporate job I'm working on in jeopardy. What do I do? Thanks, from Furloughed and Confused. So, yeah, we thought we'd call in the expert. James, what do you think?
Yeah, so look, I think it's a legitimate concern. When the new PPP came out, first thing we were talking about behind closed doors was, is this going to create rolling furloughs? Where you recall furlough, recall furlough, recall furlough. I'm sure a lot of the listeners are, I can't believe I'm saying this, they're probably too young to remember this. Talking about old guests. But if you remember back in the old airline contracts, they had no furlough clauses. And people ask all the time, like, well, that's stupid. Why would you have a no furlough clause? I mean, you can't prevent. Well, the purpose of the no furlough clause was that management would come to the union. They would say, hey, look, we want more efficiency out of you. And the union would say, yeah, sure, we'll give that to you. But you can't furlough pilots as a result of the efficiency that we're giving you. Because airline furloughs used to be seasonal. I don't know if you remember back in the early 2000s, Evergreen and Kalitta were still doing it, right? They'd hire you. 4 months later, they lay off for about 2 months while the airplane's in maintenance, and then they bring you back on for about 3 months. And you get these rolling furloughs where in a 12-month period, you may have worked 8 months in 2-month increments. And so that's brutal. I mean, it makes your life absolutely miserable because you're constantly in this no man's land of uncertainty, bouncing back and forth. I think the reality of the situation is folks try and make decisions with the intention of looking backwards, right? It's like me in the stock market, right? If I had just bought Bitcoin in 2009 and invested $100, I literally said to my wife, Eileen, the other day, I go, if I bought $100 of Bitcoin in 2009, you know what it'd be worth? It's like $23 million or something stupid. Well, guess what? I didn't buy it. I mean, so I'm here talking to you instead. But the reality is, in this situation, there is so much uncertainty and so much unknowns. We had Ben Baldanza, former CEO of Spirit, on our podcast the other day. We're talking to Brian Summers, the head editor for Skift. He's coming on here in the next couple of weeks. even they don't know. And these are the guys that are, now they can kind of give you some ideas, but it's so volatile right now that even the people that are on the boards, current CEOs, former CEOs, they don't know. And so what that means is, yeah, you might make a decision and looking backwards go, if I had made this decision instead, I could have gotten an extra 10%, 20%, whatever. But the reality of the situation is it's a crapshoot. And so right now, choosing what has the highest degree of likelihood of being more stable for the next 3 to 5 years, let's call it, or even 1 to 3 years, is likely going to work out better for you than choosing, I don't want to call it like the shiniest thing, right? But if I took a look at my regional, depending on what the regional is, like let's say it's in the American network, am I going back? No. It's a disaster over there. And, I'll go take a corporate job where, charter 91, whatever, but where their upside potential is much greater. Could I end up where 3 years from now, maybe I would have gotten a regional upgrade? Yeah, maybe, but I would have been getting pounded with furloughs and potentially low pay in that whole 3-year period. So I think folks have to really take a look at, based on the company they're going back to, what do they think the chances are that they're going to be there for the next year? And with regionals recalling due to PPP, there is a serious chance that you're going to get laid off in 3 to 4 months.
What I'm surprised about is what I get. They're legally bound by accepting the money to recall people, but why send them to training if it's only extends through March? And that's just increased costs for people and staff they obviously don't need because they wouldn't have furloughed them if they needed them. So why don't they just say, okay, great, here's your min guarantee, stay home, and we'll let you know. Like, what's the point of calling them back and giving a check ride? I don't get it.
Yeah, because you don't know what their plans are. I mean, the board or the executive team is making a series of assumptions, right? And they're making a series of assumptions as to what's going to happen in leisure travel, and they're making a series of assumptions in what's going to happen in business travel. But they ultimately don't know. Now, the leisure travel side, I would personally agree. I think there's a lot of upside potential. I think the variable that you're looking at is, can they get 100 million vaccines out in 100 days, right? Does the vaccine prove to be as effective as they say?
Or does the virus, not mutate outside of it, and then we start over here?
And
exactly.
And to be clear, right, like, if you go take a listen to episodes, this is a little early, but if you go back to the episodes we did in probably February, March of last year, it was kind of the same situation. There's a quote on one of the episodes that we did where I say, look, we don't know. There could be 1,000 or 5,000 people that die from this, right? Well, it's 400,000. I mean,
right. I remember that. Yeah.
And I remember when I made that comment of 5,000 people could die, and I got calls about how I was really pessimistic. I didn't realize how delusionally optimistic that was. But my point is, when they start putting the vaccine out, there's pent-up demand. People want to travel. I mean, people are sick and tired of not going to restaurants, not going to movies, not going on vacation. Mexico's really, really hot for travel right now. Florida's really, really hot. Arizona's really, really hot, right? So people want to go to those places. Now, how much of the leisure travel the regional is going to pick up, and how much is going to go to Spirit, Frontier, and Allegiant, right? Because Spirit, Frontier, and Allegiant don't have to change their business model or really do anything to take that leisure market. So look, you could end up with regional jets picking up a lot of that leisure flying because it's cheaper. Who knows? But they're also making assumptions that certain amounts of business travel are going to come back. And that's where I'm not as confident that that's going to happen nearly as quickly as they think it's going to. I wouldn't be surprised if you see business travel in the 30, 40, 50% range by the end of this year, which is not a ton. So look, those executives may be looking at it as, we're recalling these people. We have this training center up and running anyway. Doesn't really cost us marginally anymore to put them through it. So put them through the training, get them recurring. If we need them, great. And if not, cut them loose.
Well, I think another consideration too probably is that even if they get them through, get them current, it kind of resets the clock as far as if they furlough them again. Because I know at my airline, depending on how long you're not current, makes a difference on what sort of training you have to go through. So after a year and a half of me being gone, I got to start over, like 40 something days just like a new hire. Whereas if they reset that clock, maybe in 6 months, then they just call them in for a quick, 4-day recurrent, give them a check ride, and they're back on.
Not only that, their plans may not be to furlough. Their plans may be to do what some of the other carriers did, where they 0 monthly line guarantee them. So you're basically furloughed, right? You're not doing anything, but you're on property. That way, they may be able to say, hey, look, we're not really confident anything's going to come back now, but it might come back in the summer, and we want these folks around, trained and ready. But look, it's going to be really volatile. And Dylan, you and I were talking about this the other day about all the movement that's going on in corporate aviation. I think it was the federal excise tax, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
is what was removed during the PPP. And so I think that's about 7.5%. But I was talking to someone that bought a share on, it was FlexJet the other day, and they're like, yeah, I bought a jet card, and I don't pay the tax on that for the rest of my life as long as I keep re-upping that card. So you have all this movement in corporate aviation, right? Chances are if you start doing that, you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot for a year or 2 or 3. And the name of the game right now is not necessarily, the objective is to stay in a cockpit, right? And ideally, it has some type of turbine equipment attached to it. Turboprop, turbojet, turbofan, turbo anything. Turbocharged, right? Anything that's not a 172. So the objective, in times like this, the objective is to stay in the cockpit, and that's really hard for pilots to grasp, because they start thinking, is this a career move? Is this, they're so volatile right now, you don't know. But if you can stay in a cockpit, and ideally it has something turbine or turbocharged attached to it, right? When this all sorts itself out, which it's going to, right? When this all sorts itself out, you will be able to look back and go, you know what, I did some really solid flying over 2 or 3 years. And when the interviews are going crazy again, now the recruiters look very highly on what you did. What you did makes sense. You're qualified for better positions, whether you want to do that in corporate or at the airlines, whatever you want to do, you end up in a much better spot. But that's a hard thing to grasp when you have all that volatility, is like, dude, you're just going for a cockpit job that has the best quality of life, the best pay, best type of flying that you can get right now, which is not the same thing as it was in January of 2020. Those are very different pictures.
Yeah, which is interesting too, because on an airline application, it says in your job history, you put the address and all the information, how long you worked there and what you did. And then at the bottom, it says reason for leaving. And that's where it's interesting to always explain, if you're at the airlines, you went back to corporate and then you left that corporate job to go to the airlines, and why. And that kind of gives you your chance to explain your story. At least it did in my experience.
I was always just drawing a picture of a flute in the little comments. Put a little flute emoji. That doesn't work.
Well, that brings up an interesting point, though, because a lot of people get worried about, like, well, how am I going to explain this?
Yeah, right there, right?
And, it's funny, when you said what's the reason for leaving, I thought back to the Ron White skit when he talks about how I wasn't drunk in public. They threw me in public, right? Where but it's kind of what it is. Like, right, I didn't intend to be outside. Now I am. But, if you had a situation where you had 4 jobs in 2016 and they were all at regionals, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do, because the economy was really, really good. The job market was really, really good. People are going to go, what are you doing changing around for, right? Okay. If you had 4 jobs in 2016, but they were all increasing, like you went from FO on a turboprop to captain on a turboprop to FO on a jet to captain on a jet, everyone's going to go, dude, that's amazing. I can't believe you were able to progress that quickly. Right now, if you went from flying a regional jet or even flying a 7-3 to working at Home Depot to working at McDonald's to flight instructing to flying SIC in a King Air, people are going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe you have such an amazing work ethic and you were able to pull everything together, right? So a lot of times pilots think about this concept of job hopping or what places you worked at. They don't change their perspective for the environment, right? So right now, if you have a job doing anything, right, HR is going to look at that as a good thing. You have to think about how those moves look in context of what's going on. In 2010, when I got laid off from NetJets, I ran a flight school. Everybody that I worked with was like, dude, you're an idiot. We're NetJets pilots. We make X, right? $90,000 a year. You're flying a jet. Now you're going to go flight instruct? Well, they kept their pride intact. They collected unemployment until they ran out, and then they took FO jobs at regionals making $30,000 a year. I went to run a flight school. I made 60 instead of 90, and 6 months later ended up moving on to an organization that put me back at 90 with a pension and a 401k and a bunch of career progression, right? Sometimes that next move you make is just an intermediate move. And yeah, it might hurt your ego. And it might not be what you wanted to do, or it might not be even what you're best suited to do, or maybe well below what your qualifications are. But it's setting you up for that next move. And a lot of times it's setting you up for that next move a lot quicker than you think it's going to happen.
Okay, so I have a couple questions regarding seniority numbers and possible resignation, James. So let's look at the first scenario here where we're getting this email from Furloughed and Confused. And he's talking about maybe having an opportunity in corporate. Have you heard of anybody voluntarily resigning their number even prior to a job offer to maybe in their mind that makes them think that it's more competitive? So, maybe you're at the bottom of the list at a regional and you're like, this number really, maybe they perceive that it's not worth that much. So it's more of an anchor. Let's get rid of it while I'm on the job hunt. Have you run into that at all?
Yeah, so I'll use my own personal story. So I got laid off from NetJets, and I had a seniority number. And my attitude was, so if I get dumped by somebody, we're not going back out on a date. It just isn't going to happen. And so my attitude was, I'm going to do everything I can to end up in the best position I possibly can. And when they call me back, I'll take a look at where I'm at. And if I'm in a better position, I don't go back. But if I'm not in a better position, I know I have to, because I put 100% effort into this, so this is the best I was going to get. So I going back's the place to go. And so I did that, and I ended up in a better position. And when they recalled me, I just kept saying no and drug it out as long as I possibly could until they finally said, you can either say no or we're going to kick you off the list, and they kicked me off the list. I always recommend everybody, if you have a seniority number, it costs you nothing to keep it until they force you to dump it. But while you're in limbo, you need to be doing everything you can to get yourself into the best position possible, so that if when they call you back to that regional, and maybe they're on a pay concession or whatever, and you've been working at the local ice cream shop making $3.50 an hour plus tips, you can go, yeah, that regional job's going to be better. But if that regional calls you back and you're at a corporate operator now and you've got a new type rating and you're flying 300 or 400 hours a year versus going back to a regional where you're going to fly 100 hours a year and be commuting, you can pretty confidently go, hey, I'm going to get rid of that seniority number and I'm okay with that. Do people resign it ahead of time? I mean, some do. I just don't see what the value is in doing it. It doesn't cost you anything to hold it.
Yeah, but I guess my question is there some perception that if I get rid of this ahead of time, now this is a question I don't have to deal with, and it could potentially make me more competitive in the corporate space because I can head off that already and be like, look, there isn't even a question of am I going to be recalled or not? Like, look, that was an experience. I'm sending my number back. I think this is really applies to, I think, in kind of our listener's question where he's kind of appears like he's at the very bottom of the list at a regional.
Yeah. Okay, I get what you're saying now.
Yeah.
We don't have that problem when we coach people on how to go in an interview. So there's a certain percentage of the time that they, especially when you're at a regional, they won't even think to bring up the recall question because it's a regional, right? They don't have enough respect for the regional that you even care as to whether or not you would go back. So there's that. There are other times where people will bring it up. They'll flat out ask you, right? And this typically is an issue more for the legacy folks.
Right.
But it will still be an issue for some regional folks, depending on what regional you were at and how good the deal was. But there's a number of different ways to handle that in an interview that does not require you to resign your seniority number.
Okay. I think that was kind of my main question was, will you pass some filter before, when they're screening your resumes, and maybe,
it doesn't pop up until you're in the interview.
Okay.
Because typically first of all, most people don't ask the question, but if they were going to ask the question, it would be, are you willing to resign your seniority number? Just check yes. I'm willing to consider anything. I'm not saying I'm going to do it, right? Because until I know you're too early in the interview process to know, right? If you ask me if I'm going to resign my seniority number and you tell me you're going to pay me $300,000 a year to be home based with a pension and health care, well, yeah, of course I'll resign it. right? I mean, have a good day. Thank you, right? But if you're like, well, it's going to be a contract for $300 a day and we can guarantee you 1 day every 6 months, no, I'm probably going to hold on to that seniority number. Thank you. Right? So a lot of times if they ask ahead of an interview, it'll be, will you consider? My thing is always check yes on that, because you don't know what they're going to offer you until you get into that interview. And they may offer you a deal in that interview where you go, yeah, this is easy. I'm going to resign it. And if not, then there are a lot of other ways to handle that question in the interview that creates a lot less conflict than people think. It's a non-issue when done correctly.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So getting back to this particular scenario where our listener has got an interview for corporate, but is also getting this like kind of maybe recall that that we don't think might last that long, without knowing all of the specifics, what are maybe the 2 points you might make to help him make that decision of should he refuse the recall and pursue his?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is probably the easiest, which is if they did recall you, what airplane are they going to put you in, and what base are they going to put you in? Because what you had before you got furloughed may not be the deal they're giving you when you're coming back. So if you're going to be commuting to a crash pad to be junior reserve on an airplane you're never going to touch, versus you're going to go to corporate and be home-based and fly 300 hours a year, it may not even be worth the conversation of going, do I want to take the recall, right? So that's one. But let's say they do offer a recall and it's a good enough deal, right? You live close in base, or you think you're going to fly a decent amount. Then you really gotta go out a couple steps and go, look, what's my objective here? Like, where do I want to end up long term? And you got to figure out what's going to help me get there the quickest. I know pilots tend to think in stats like total time, turbine PIC time, so on and so forth. So, I mean, that is a valuable consideration, right? How many hours per year do I think I'll fly at the regional? How many hours per year do I think I'll fly corporate? What do I think my realistic potential of upgrading at the regional is versus upgrading at corporate? Answering the upgrade at corporate is going to be a lot easier to answer than your upgrade in the regional. Dylan, I think we used to have conversations about this, about like, dude, I had to wait 1.5 years to upgrade. No. now you're going to know what it's like to wait 9 years.
Yeah.
So, upgrade. And then, same thing. I am a big proponent of money in the bank, right? So if you're going to pay me $100,000 a year versus $50,000 a year, right? Depending on what my debt situation is, so on and so forth, I may take a job that people consider a lower standard job, like a captain on a King Air versus a captain on a Citation 10 or
perhaps
or a
being a
jet.
Pilot at Colgan Airlines.
Yeah, there you go. Now we're going through poor life choices, right? But taking a look at, hey, who's going to pay me more? Because when it's all said and done, whether you choose corporate or you choose the airlines, whatever your end goal is, you can use that experience to get you there. I mean, we have just as many corporate pilots that ended up at Legacy Airlines and Southwest and Spirit and Allegiant and Frontier as we did, regional pilots. If we take a look at our military, our airline, and our corporate pilots, they're all ending up in the places they want to be. The problem is pilots get themselves tripped up on the intermediate steps and they're like, well, if I want to be a Legacy airline pilot, I've got to be a regional captain. You're like, really? Then how come during the height of all the hiring, there was about 5,000 regional captains all sitting out there with 6,000 hours of turbine PIC time that were not getting hired? Right? I mean, so as long as you're staying in a cockpit, as long as you're consistently flying, right, taking up duties outside the cockpit, you're going to be fine, whether you're doing that at a regional or you're doing it at a corporate company. So it really boils down to what's going to work best for your life. And if rolling furloughs or potential rolling furloughs works best for you, go back to the regional. And I mean that, like if you own a business or you got something on the side that you're doing or you're doing contract work, those rolling furloughs may not be a bad deal for you. But for a vast majority of pilots, it is a bad deal for them. In which case, stability is probably going to win, at least in the short term right now. If you have any concerns over how to explain this, give us a call. It'll take me 30 minutes. I have a couple questions I'll ask you, get the information put together, and you'll have an answer to spit out right at the other end. That'll work perfectly fine.
All right.
Wow. All right. Well, that was a freebie for Furloughed and Confused. We really appreciate that.
How's that
James?
for confidence / arrogance?
Yeah, I love it. That's the close. He's
Now,
dropped the close.
look, we deal with it so much that it's uncomfortable to watch people suffer through making a decision that's really best for them and their family because they think, oh man, it's going to hurt me long term when it won't. It won't hurt you long term.
That's great perspective. Well, that's why we knew you were the one to call, because you're seeing this every day. So, well, James, while we got you on the phone, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the low-cost carriers. And you mentioned, they're kind of already positioned. Their business model kind of fits with the marketplace right now. We're starting to see some hiring, I think. I think I just saw Frontier's going to be hiring soon. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing at low-cost carriers and how that's working for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, look, as is becoming clear, I think most people, leisure travel is going to lead the way. People are sick and tired of being at home and not being able to travel. And as we start getting vaccines in arms, people are going to want to go to Disney or Cancun or, wherever, right? Someplace warm probably. And so if you just take a step back and look at it logically, the ultra low cost carriers are structured for that traveler, the leisure traveler. And they happen to be structured to offer it at a significantly lower cost than the legacy airline competitors, and they don't have to change their business model to do it. So you're already watching them start to make moves and start getting ready to hire, right? Offering upgrades, because they are going to take advantage of that leisure swing. Now, there's going to be some variation in that. Does that swing start up in May, or does it start up in, let's say, June or July? But unless something, some mutation or something vastly different happens, I think we're going to start seeing some of that stuff picking up in the summer time frame. The interesting thing with the ultra low costs, this Ben Baldanza explained this the other day, is airlines they're called I think it's called an intermediate product, right? Meaning, when someone purchases an airline ticket, that's not what they actually wanted, right? They wanted to go to Disney. The airline is just what they had to purchase to get there. And so people are willing to pay less for that, and they're willing to have a slightly less comfortable experience for the cost savings, because they want to spend the money when they get to Disney on whatever hamburgers or whatever Disney charges you for out the nose, right? Okay. So they're poised to really be able to dominate in that area, because the United, a Delta, and American can't really compete at that cost structure. They just can't. And so it's going to be really interesting to see where are they able to increase capacity, where are they able to increase passenger loads. And because they have a single fleet, they can start switching around their route structure to meet different destinations pretty easily. I think it's going to be a bit of a culture shock for folks to have to put in the same level of energy to get hired by Frontier that they had to put into getting hired at United. It's same thing at the regionals. People are going to have to put in a United, American, or Delta level effort to get hired at a regional. And so I think that's going to be a little bit weird, but you should hopefully see a lot less volatility at the ultra low cost than you're going to see at the legacies and the regionals, which is, like I said, a unique situation to be in, but also kind of exciting if you think about it.
The only consistent thing in this business is that it's crazy.
Yep.
That's the only thing.
So, I mean, we have a few friends, Max, from school that I thought made a pretty shrewd move a few years ago. They looked at, especially I have a lot of buddies at Frontier, and they looked at Frontier and they just looked at the growth potential, and they made a very calculated risk, and or calculated decision, and they looked and they said, I could get on at a major, I could get on here, but I see the potential at this other carrier. And I think maybe in a previous time, a lot of people viewed being at a low-cost carrier as a stepping stone. But now, James, are you seeing more people looking at, I'm going to get hired at this low-cost carrier, and that might be, where I could run for the next 20 to 30 years of my career, possibly?
Yeah, we started seeing that before the coronavirus started to hit. I think, look, pretty much every pilot that got into aviation, right? If you went a military track, it was because you wanted to be friggin' Maverick. And if you went in the airline track, it's the catch me if you can, right? Everybody wanted to be a 7-4 captain, right? So there are no romantic movies made about Frontier pilots. There just aren't.
Right.
So there's a status thing involved, right? The other thing is, look, people have been making fun of the low cost for years. a low cost pilot told me this one. He's like, every time a Spirit jet departs, a trailer park is emptied. So they just trash on those guys horribly. But if you look at their business model and who they're catering to and what's going on, right, they're providing a level of stability to their employees that I don't think was valued as highly as it probably should have been until something like the coronavirus hits and you go, oh, wait a second here. And so, now people are looking at it and going, I could sit in an Airbus for the next 20 years, 25 years, kind of like I was going to do at United or Delta. And yeah, I can upgrade to captain and make, I don't know, $200 or $230 or $250,000 a year or $300,000 a year, depending on how much overtime you pick up during whatever contract season they got going on. And that's not a bad life. But you only get to that conclusion when you've been laid off or close to laid off and you're looking at I may have to lose my house and my car and all these things that actually time with my family that matter to me. So yeah, no, I think there's going to be a number of people that are going to look at Spirit and Frontier and Allegiant as career destinations, but because it could be 2 or 3 or 4 years before they can even think about getting hired by a legacy airline. And at that point, they have a seniority number and a quality of life at Frontier, Spirit, or Allegiant. And it's why would I leave? I mean, it's, I'm going to go leave Frontier. I'm flying an Airbus at Frontier, so I'm going to go leave Frontier to go to United to go fly the exact same Airbus on a pay cut with the worst schedule and quality of life.
I think it's a similar thing that's been happening a little bit further back with people at Southwest, where everybody's hiring and people are consciously going to Southwest because of the job security and the fact they've never furloughed. And that weighs into people's minds, like you said, when they've gone through one of these downturns and had something bad happen and know that sucks. And you want to limit your exposure to that. And now that's extending even further to the low cost carriers saying, listen, this is a viable long-term gig. These are good gigs.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of like dating, right? You go out and you find someone, you're like, man, they're really boring. They just they don't want to do anything fun. And then you have a crazy ex-girlfriend or boyfriend. You go, boring's really kind of, that's appealing. I like someone that just likes to watch movies and I don't know, cook dinner. It's the exact way this is, right? It's, look, when you become and you can talk about this better than I can, Max, but what does it take about two 4 days and you've flown the entire Southwest system? Right. I mean, there's not a lot of variety there. You're, unless Dubuque is your thing, I don't know. But that's not why you go there. Right. You go there because you can go out, you can go do your fine, you can go home. Right.
Well,
it's good.
Well, one of the main reasons I did that, the flying portion, it's not that glamorous, but you also, once you do some of the international flying and fly to these quote unquote glamorous destinations, you realize that it gets old just like anything else.
Because you're the help.
And the reason I went there mainly is because the biggest difference is that everybody there just wants to have a good time and is in a good mood. I can't just go to work where everyone's pissed off. I just can't do it. It's just not me. And so that's why I went there, because at least you go and you've been to wherever for the 500th time at the same hotel, but the people are different. Everyone's there trying to have a good time. And that's what kept it interesting for me and my personality. And that's what worked. And so that, like you said, it's in the eyes of the beholder what's interesting and stimulating to you.
I was going to say, there's two things with that you touched on that I think are really, really important that people aren't kind of paying attention to. So number one is the people are happy to work there. So I don't know if anybody's seen any of the union communications from American, but when you got MEC dudes coming out and going, look, you guys are going to get laid off because there's no way I'm taking a pay cut to save your job and you just need to deal with that. Right? Dude, that nastiness doesn't go away when recalls happen. People remember that. So you want to talk about a toxic work environment. It's one thing when management has a gun to your back. It's another when your friggin' union representatives are holding it. The second thing is, people romanticize what the travel is, right? So you watch someone that gets on a 767 or a 777 and they're, oh man, they're going to all these international destinations. Okay, so you went to Brussels. Congratulations. You departed on a Monday. You got there on a Tuesday. You left on a Thursday. You're home for 3 days. You go do that again. How many times do you want to go stay in that hotel of one of the 6 destinations that you fly to?
Dude, and the time change, that's what kills. I've done that so many times now that time change.
Well, you do get to land an airplane twice a month. You forgot to mention that.
And it's funny because the alternative is like, oh, you got to fly 4 legs in a day. God, that's got to be. I'm like, dude, nowadays with CPDLC and everything, it's so easy. It's not like you're, with a chart tuning the VOR all day long. Like you just,
or like a sextant.
Yeah, you go in there. I can have that thing
navigation.
turned and the cockpit ready in like minutes. I mean, it auto loads everything. You're ready to go. And then, especially when you've done it so many times, you're on autopilot. You do it. You get up, you have a cup of coffee, hang out. It's really.
So when we take a look at low cost and ultra low cost, I think people are now going to be coming into that with the mindset of, okay, the cost of me getting to go do that is all this volatility for my family, or I cannot do it and fly an airplane and be happy flying an airplane and not have to go through this mess of applying to Home Depot again.
So the last thing I want to talk about and ties into this, and we've talked about this before, Max, so many pilots draw so much of their personality and their identity from their job. And, often that can lead to unhappiness when we're in a situation like this. And this goes exactly what you're saying, James, is like when you look at, is who I am defined by the type of airplane I fly or the company that I work for, or do you realize that maybe the quality of life and being home and the stability are the more important things? That's probably an entire podcast series of 10 episodes, but it seems like as you get older in your career,
I have a story for this. You're gonna have to put me into witness protection when I tell it, though.
All right, we have a special second caller. I'm gonna put the voice scrambler on. Go ahead.
So your point of people derive their value from being a pilot is spot on, right? So in the United States, you get asked 3 questions every time when someone meets you. What's your name? Where are you from? What do you do? And if you don't have a question to one of those 3, right, you're screwed. So I get laid off from NetJets, and my parents live in Jersey. So me and my wife are out in Jersey, and we're doing dinner with my parents, and we happen to be in this restaurant. And I don't know why, but it happened to be a grammar school teacher I happened to be in the restaurant and recognized me. Goes, oh, hey, James, how you doing? Like, oh, great. What are you up to? Like, oh, moved out to Ohio. And, oh, what are you doing? I'm a pilot. And Eileen, without skipping a beat, goes, ha, you're not a pilot. And literally, I slid under the table. I've never experienced something so painful in my life. I mean, what little shred of self-esteem I had left was just literally destroyed. But I learned a lesson. And that was to not tie my personal value to what I do for a living. Now, fast forward 7 years, and now Eileen is the hotel program manager for NetJets. So she does all the buying for all the hotels. Well, now whenever you stay in a hotel and you order breakfast, the director of catering is the one that brings it out to you, right? The hotel manager is the one, in one of the brands of hotels, just to give you an idea, the hotel manager was required to come out and shake her hand every time she checked in. Okay? I mean, it's absurd. So I started saying to her, you better watch out. That's not for you. It's for the position you hold. It's not for Eileen. It's for the hotel program manager at NetJets. And sure enough, when she started looking at leaving NetJets, it was brutally hard because you start to lose that ego component. And for pilots, look, when you walk in and you say to someone, I'm a pilot, it stops them right in their tracks, right? I mean, there's not a lot of people that know pilots. When you say I'm a United pilot or a Southwest pilot or I fly celebrities, right, that means something. And so I think 2 things. Number one, folks have to remember that if they are a pilot, whether they're flying an airplane or not right now, and they want to get back into the cockpit, they're going to be able to do it. They will. I know right now it's demoralizing for some folks, but when everyone's on top of the wave, they go, oh, this wave will never crash, man. I'm the best surfer ever. And then the wave crashes, like, oh, there'll never be another wave again. First of all, when you're on top of the wave, every wave crashes. Don't worry about it. It's going to happen. But also, when the wave crashes, just get on your board and swim back out there. There's another one coming. There just is. And so they have to kind of keep that in mind, is that Before you were a pilot, you were a son or a daughter or a husband or a wife or a sister or an aunt or an uncle, right? You were something and you are something. If you have kids, your kids don't give a shit that you're a pilot. They just don't. They care if you're at their T-ball games. And guess what? You got a lot of time to do that right now. And so I think it's just kind of really important for folks to remember that they were something way before they were a pilot. They still are a pilot, whether or not they're sitting in a cockpit or not. And they will get back into the cockpit if they want to. But between now and then, it's way more impressive to be able to live indoors, have running water and electricity. And you can do that not being a pilot. And if you can do that not being a pilot, you have elevated yourself from pilot to hero. It's just really hard to recognize that in the moment, because maybe you're sitting in a restaurant and your wife tells you you're not a pilot, and it literally just shreds everything that's left of you. She's going to kill me when she hears this.
You shut your mouth when you're talking to me.
I've tried to tell this story in like public speeches or like public speaking events. Yeah. Every time she's like, pull it out. So,
So if you have a personalized aviation related license plate, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. Hey, you guys have somebody, one of your sponsors is an insurance company, right? Do they do life insurance? Loss of medical? Because I may need it. Yeah.
You're in an emergency Harvey Watt policy right now. We might get it. Well, we have a special caller on the line. It's Eileen. Go ahead. Bring her out from behind the curtain. Yeah. No, that is great perspective, James. And I think so much of the career can be navigating your career choices can be so much easier once you come to that realization. Once you stop driving all of your self-worth and identity from your job, that's going to make this process much easier. I went through the same thing myself, and look, I had to go teach driver's ed. So I went all the way to the bottom.
Those were some of the best years of my life. Listening to you teach driver's ed.
I applied, when I got laid off from NetJets, I applied to the Verizon store and they wouldn't hire me because I didn't have enough experience selling cell phones. Home Depot wouldn't hire. I mean, like, you don't realize how useless being a pilot is when you don't have an airplane until you run into one of these situations. And the problem is, this is a very hard lesson to learn that nobody can explain to you. You kind of have to just go through it, but it's fucking brutal. I mean, it's soul crushing. But then you realize, oh, that was just in my head.
Yeah. And I feel fortunate that I went through it so early in my career. I was in my late 20s, early 30s. Yeah. And that honestly was...
I was 26.
This is especially for our furloughed and confused, who's probably a younger person just starting their career, be grateful that it's happening now. You know, I mean, I think
much easier when you
start of your career, if you can gain the perspective from this situation.
Well, not only that, he's only responsible for himself more than likely. He's or her, and so it's not like you have a family and kids and people to support and house and all this stuff.
But let's say he has 10 kids and a 5,000 square foot house, because he is a pilot, right? Yeah. So he could be 25
and 3 wives.
But the reality situation is, regardless of the situation that somebody's in, the younger that you experience this, and I say this not to be condescending, because I want to be clear, like, this is, if he's going through this is brutally painful. I don't care if he's 22, 24, or 54. It hurts anytime you go through this. But if you're going through it and you're 55, it's going to be way more difficult to recover. If you're going through it and you're 25, right, it's going to be really tough, but you are going to get through it, and you are going to make way, way better career decisions moving forward, number one. And I don't know if either of you experience this. I am way freaking happier at work now, because work fits in a very specific place in my life. I don't get caught up in a lot of the BS because I'm very clear on why I'm doing this.
Yep. And that helps shape your career choices too, where even like in mine personally, where I was the flight department manager. So I was involved in everything all the time, like literally every day. They had at least a text message or something, to then going to be an airline pilot where you just are involved in very little, just your own little segment of wearing what you're supposed to wear, showing up on time, and flying the jet how they want you to. Go home.
But the biggest thing I think for folks to realize, there's a lot of phone calls that we get where people are like, is my flying career over? No, it's on pause. It's just on pause. And it's not even on pause for as long as you think it is. And so I think that's part of what makes this more difficult on people, is that mindset of like, we're never going to get out of this. Yeah, we are. We will. And guess what? If for all of you that have been pent up at home, you realize how much you need to get away from your family, right? Like, people are going to leisure travel. It's like, basically medically, mental health wise, it's required.
Right.
And so, you know, part of that is just desperation, or right, is, hey, look, this is all over. You're right. It's not going the way you thought it was going to, but it doesn't mean it's over. And there will be a point where you will look back at this and you will be able to torture a brand new FO through stories that I promise they don't care about how you used to walk to school uphill both ways. You know, so you have that benefit going for you. But they will get folks will get through this, right? As long as they can just keep money coming in the door, they can, you know, keep paying down whatever debt they have. They're going to get through it. And they will be back in a cockpit quicker than they think.
I think that's a good note to end on. The takeaways from this: buy stock in Frontier and Disneyland, I guess. Also.
Oh, definitely. Follow the mouse.
That's right. James, we really appreciate you taking the time to give some perspective to Furloughed and Confused, and the rest of our listeners. It's just a good reminder every once in a while. It's nice to have a pep talk, I think.
Yeah,
that's
man.
Really what it is.
You know, always here for the positivity.
I love it. I love it. Well, if folks want even more positivity and to get a hold of you for a little one-on-one time, what's the best way they can do that?
RavenCareers.com, man. Click contact us. You go right to my schedule. You can talk to the James Onieal, and I'll put Eileen on the phone. You can ask her what that the
positivity warrior, James Onieal.
What did James's face look like when you cut his heart out in front of him?
I would, if you want to talk to James, I'd do it sooner rather than later, just in case.
Yeah.
When his wife finds the podcast, he might not be around much longer.
upset.
Yeah. So, all right, James, we'll have all your contact info and show notes. Appreciate it, and thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure as always, James.
Thank you, folks.
Be on guard.
All right, Max, we've been slacking telling stories of our own.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time. We finally got one of a listener on board. Tell some stories.
Let's do it.
Dylan, what's going on?
Hello. We will not use your name to protect the innocent.
Oh, it's one of those calls, is it?
That's right.
Where were you last night?
Yeah, that's right. So there's a lot of drama in aviation, and we always had a saying, especially at school, as the prop turns. You know? But the caller
isn't that saying still true?
Yeah, of course it is. But
Okay.
in your case, it's even better because your days flying turboprops had a lot of really good stories. And I just wanted to go down memory lane with you a little bit tonight and some of your best turboprop adventures.
Okay.
But we'll go wherever you want to go. I should say you had King Airs, you flew Medevac in the PC-12. Didn't you fly night cargo in like a
Yes.
twin Cessna?
That was pre-turboprop, yeah.
That was
turbocharged.
Was there a turbocharger involved?
Yeah, that you set the mixture by the glow of the turbocharger through the louvers in the cowl.
It's a visual mixture setting procedure. I like
Okay.
that.
Did that? I can't remember if they taught us that at Embry-Riddle. I can't remember.
Yeah.
If that was,
I think that's in the Cessna
Yes, the
manual.
best way to
Just
determine the
lean
stoichiometric
for-
ratio is by the color of the turbo.
cherry red.
that's right. All right. Tell us the King Air
want
Mexico
to-
story. Yeah.
King Air Mexico?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you had said, yeah, I flew cargo in the middle of the night out of New Mexico for a while, and then got my big break. Finally was gonna fly something that burned something besides 100 low lead, and
Something with
got a
engine
jet-
instrument gauges that you could set the power with.
Yeah, I'm not sure what torque really is, but yeah, it looks a lot of gauges. Looks cool. Got a job flying King Airs. And the course was as green as it gets, right seat, just, so excited to be there, but as
Right.
green as it gets. And the course was been there a week or two, and get this trip, which is going down in Baja, Mexico. And we're going to land on a dirt runway and drop these passengers off at a little whale watching airport, a whale watching village in this runway. It's this little dirt road in this town. And of course, these passengers, the owner of the company had donated these trips to the Boys and Girls Club and done a Boys and Girls Club auction. So of course, these passengers are going to be, non-experienced with small aircraft.
Right.
And, private travel. But they're super excited to go watch these, whales come up into Baja there. So I'm super excited for the trip. I don't think I've ever been to Mexico at this point. And so, show up super early to the FBO, and the other pilot rolls in, the captain rolls in about a good hour after I do. And he proceeds to, tell me he hasn't been down to this airport either, but, we're just going to grab the lat long for it. And, he heads into the pilot lounge, comes out with a scratched piece of paper, and, I don't know any better. And, nothing out of the norm. Passengers show up, and, we get on the airplane, King Air 200. We head down, or flying down into Mexico. And, we get down to with Mazatlan Center there, and, they clear us direct, and we, type in the lat long in the, I think it could literally have been a KLN 90B GPS. King Air 200 days. And we're cruising down, and we've been told, it's a dirt runway, and it's on the west side of the Baja Peninsula, about halfway down. So it's kind of looking about right. We're cruising in, we start descending in, but the airport we're going to is on the east side of the peninsula. And we come up to it, we overfly it, and it's paved. It's kind of, broken up pavement, but it's not dirt. But there's I will remember this forever. There's a yellow Nissan Xterra midway on the runway, and it drives off. I'm like, oh, perfect. That must be the transportation for the passengers. And of course, you're making excuses for why everything doesn't quite add up.
Yeah, whales migrate up the Sea of Cortez all the time. No big deal.
Yeah.
They just go to Rocky Point for a cocktail and then turn.
Exactly. And there's so many things not adding up after the fact. But of course, I'm the green guy in the right seat, just there to, flip the gear and talk on the radio. And so overfly the runway, turn 90 degrees, enter the downwind, turn base. And as we're turning final, all of a sudden, one of the things is these power lines just go zipping under the airplane that we had no idea were there. And just catch, one of those just yank back on the yoke.
That wasn't written down on the napkin, huh?
Yeah, it was.
Airnav.com didn't have a briefing on that?
The Baja Pilot's Guide?
No. Yeah. It was probably in the Baja Pilot's Guide. And then, of course, that kind of throws you off for a second. Then you just kind of drop the nose back down. And all I remember about that point forwards, I remember the power lines, and then I remember the wheels touching down. Again, I'm just in the right seat, as green as it can be. And I remember the wheels hitting down, and I was both realizing we're landing on like plants or vegetation or something. And the props are literally chopping through plants, which happen to be a bunch of marijuana plants, we later come to find out. And about halfway through rolling down this runway, all of a sudden you see something on the left side jump out of the way, which happens to be a person. And then we hit a giant, call it a 55-gallon trash bag, which was later to be found out full of marijuana, which goes through the left main tire and gear, just goes right through this bag. So we go rolling down the runway going, oh
this
my
guy's
God.
just making minimum wage, minding his own business, harvesting these crops.
And here comes a King Air landing on his farm. Well, it's about to get a whole lot more interesting, because as we're rolling out, all of a sudden we see driving outside the kind of airport area, and there happens to be a little barbed wire fence separating this, is some type of armored looking vehicle, I will call it. Now, granted, my imagination is probably making up, is probably just a Jeep or something, but all I remember, there were guys hanging out with guns. And we are both looking at this truck driving at us on the outside of, let's call it the runway, on this dirt road. Dust is coming up, and there are guys literally hanging out with guns. So we roll out to the runway, and all I remember is the captain yelling, flaps 20 and, this and that, and, set the trim. And he's just whipping the airplane around in a 180 and just firewalling it to take off the other direction. And all I remember is looking at this truck paralleling us on the runway. And there was a turn in at the other end of the runway where they could kind of cut us off and get on the runway. And I remember looking back out that little round window sitting in the right seat. You could look into the cabin.
Yeah.
And of course I see all the people back there and looking at this, Jeep with armored guys and, guns hanging out. And we out accelerate them and rotate back up into the air. And I'm just waiting to hear like gunshots on the airplane. And everything's okay. So then as we rotate, the captain is yelling at me to get on my BlackBerry, because it was my BlackBerry days, to text the chief pilot and get the correct lat long to the right runway. Which we successfully did and made it to the other side of the peninsula. We were very close. We were just on the wrong side. And landed at the correct airport.
What do the passengers have to say?
So when we were making the 180 on the runway, I was looking back at that window to look where these, set of rallies or who they were hanging out with guns.
You were going to hold up, were you going to hold up the metal can, like the maintenance logbook he uses as a bulletproof shield? Flaps 20, shield me. They're flanking.
Probably be a good use. But I looked back at them and I said, I don't think we're at the right airport. And they go, I don't think we are either. And they were literally in tears. And
Oh my God.
It was probably the worst bid they ever made at the Boys and Girls Club
That's
auction.
the best. Oh my God. Wait, so you had enough gas to get back after all this shenanigans?
Yeah, we actually weren't very far away. We were just literally directly across. I think it was like a 15-minute flight just over to the correct airport, which happens to be.
Wait. The question that begs to be asked is, where did the chief pilot get the first set of coordinates from?
Well,
did you ever think about that?
Yeah.
Is there's an old shorts parked behind the hangar that no one knows what it's for?
I don't want to. So it was one word in front of the airport. So I don't want to give too many details here, but it was the airport was 3 words. And if you took the first word out, it was the other airport we went to. So it was one of those just, you type in Google and, oh yeah, that sounds right. And it was just, one of those pronunciations where just one more word changed.
Now, did you go back and do a beverage service on that intermediate leg? Try and get a tip.
So the story continues though slightly is we landed at the other airport and we had another King Air going down there. We had given away, I guess, 2 of these trips. They went on the same day. So there was another crew down there with another King Air. So we land there, passengers all go off. We're all just trying to regroup. Well, we're also looking at the airplane and realizing that the left landing gear is absolutely just packed with pot. That's how we realized it was pot at that point. And anybody that knows the King Air landing gear, you got this de-icing system. So you got this, big line coming down and you got all this, de-icing, tubes going everywhere. And there's just a fair amount going on down there. And it's just packed full of this green pot. And of course, we got to go back and clear customs at Brown. And
the dog comes out.
The dog just dies as he's walking out.
So all of us are down there and we are finding like pens, and the other crew had like a Daub kit. They're pulling out toothbrushes and we're sitting there, like Fuji bottles of water trying to like wash out this landing gear so we can then go clear customs and hopefully the dog doesn't come out.
Can you imagine the customs guy walks up? Don't ask, sir. It's been a long day.
Listen, buddy.
But I did happen to take a picture of this, which was probably the best thing. And I have a great picture of the left landing gear of a King Air 200 just full of pot.
Now, did you fill out an ASRS report after that?
Wait, are you able to share? Or can we post this picture?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see how it incriminate. I mean,
Okay.
I don't see
what's the
why
difference
not.
at this point?
Perfect. All right. We will post that on our social media. That'll be incredible. And I mean,
I'll send it.
the quality of these BlackBerry cameras is really stunning.
Yeah, don't look for much over like a megapixel or something.
You'll take up. Oh my gosh. So, and this is within the first month of you being at this job.
Oh, weeks, like just weeks. Yeah.
So you go back and clear customs, and then they didn't say anything.
No, we easily clear customs, no issues. Yeah, went back, and yeah, I think the disclosures were made where need be. And
what did you tell your chief
there.
pilot? Like, did anybody say anything?
Not that I know of. It was one of those deals where you come back and you don't hear much of anything. It was
what happens in Mexico stays in Mexico.
Yeah. I also think we bent a pair of props on a King Air by getting a little too low to the ocean. So it was a good operation.
It's Wild
Wow.
West.
Excellent. We'll have the name of that operator in the show notes.
Yeah,
so
link
you can
to their
reference.
web.
Looks like they're hiring actually, so it might be a great opportunity for young airmen looking to build some flight time. Oh man. Well, I think that's good. You have more stories, but we're gonna have to save it for later because I don't think we're topping that one.
Yeah,
That to me is
just
the ultimate. Have you? Now I got a question for you. Have you ever told that story in a job interview? Tell me about a time.
Tell me about
you
a
and the
time you've been
captain-
chased by a Unimog full of.
No.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you see a yellow Xterra?
I'll leave that one for my shrink.
Oh man, someday that'll be an incredible story to tell
Yeah.
in a job interview. Sometime you have to think of some really enlightening revelation you had.
A good teaching moment that came out of that one.
Yeah,
Let me tell you
How
about a
to
time.
spin it.
Yeah, when you're teaching your kid how to fly one day. I had a KLN 89. A lot long.
do you even know what that is?
Yeah, there's something to be said for KLN, the KLN 89 pilots.
What's actually miraculous is that you're able to twist in with the knob the new lat long by the time you cross the peninsula.
We were good at that stuff back then. I mean, I couldn't do it to save my life today, but back then we could do it.
Oh man. Unbelievable. All right. Well, thank you for really putting yourself out there and being willing to share your lessons with I know a lot of aviators will take some lessons away from that. Well, thanks for taking the time to call and appreciate the story. And send us a picture of that landing gear. That's incredible.
Absolutely. We'll do.
All
All right, man. See ya.
Good.
See ya.
Have a good one, guys.
There's no topping that. I think we just wrap up the show right now. That's
Yeah,
about it.
Let's just drop the mic and leave.
That's right. Big thank you to our friends at Harvey Watt, harveywatt.com. Thanks to our friends at the Airfare Snack Pouch group. And remember to write that review so you can get entered in that giveaway. Thanks to James Onieal for calling in. Always appreciate his perspective. If you want to get featured on that flight advice segment, there's a couple different ways you can do it. info@215podcast.com. Email, you can send us your quandary. But if you want to remain anonymous, I built an anonymous submission form on the website.
Oh, clever.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to point out is if you want to ask a question to us, but you want us
Yeah.
to direct it to anybody else that's been on the show, like people that we've interviewed or TED, personality, anybody like that, feel free.
Yeah. We are not saying we'll get them on the phone, but go ahead and put that in there.
We'll definitely make it college.
We'll try. But yeah, so we're looking forward to more of that. More good stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned and find us on LinkedIn, social media at 215 Podcast. All the links are in the show notes. Merch store, it's all there. Rate, review, subscribe, smash that like button. We will see you in a couple of weeks. But until then, remember, flexibility.
It's the key to air power. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
Rock on.
Challenger, can I get a wins and
Tighten up that formation, airman.
can I get a breaking action report real quick just for the other
What's
Sir, it's dry.
Sir, cancel that flight plan and give me a braking action and then overhead brake, and you're good. I got this.
Any plus or minus on final?
We're suspending beverage service while we provide this Overwatch tactical maneuver here.
Sir, we're getting a little... Not right now. Not right now.
I'm getting on the A cars immediately.
I'm saving lives, son.
How else can you land at an airport if there's no control tower?
All right, Southwest. Turn left heading 270. Descend and maintain 5,000.
Alaska Airlines 342, new call sign. Overlord. Serpent 6.
All right, American. You follow the Southwest on final. Sidestep it to...
Keep it tight.
26 right. Plan on the north route. Don't you get on the ground.
Take the keg route into the...
We're going to take you around through enemy territory back to Charlie 24.
There's no other way. Familiar with the steep tactical approach here. We're going to... Threats at the...
We've got some unidentified bogeys north of the airport. Looks like to be a high-wing single-engine aircraft. We'll keep you advised.
Well, the nice thing is, too, I mean, they could give live wind reports with the smoke of the burritos coming out of the control
That's a window. That's a...
Guys.
Caution for mountain obscuration from the burrito smoke coming from the... VFR is not recommended, but we're doing it.
I can't believe that controller goes, now, is there any way you could land without a control tower?
Now, are you able to extend the landing gear without an actual landing clearance?
There won't be any light gun signals or anything like that.
You guys are just going to have to inform each other of your position. Have you heard of such a thing?
Technology?
My manager's in the AIM right now trying to figure out.
Well, the best is I didn't even know what frequency. He goes, yeah, we were just talking about that. I don't know.
I don't know. Do you guys have any input on this? Now, I'm going to give you a vector to the 2 mile, 45-degree entry of the pattern. Does that sound familiar? Is that something you can work with?
There's a segmented circle on the south.
Now, this said, do you want me to send you on the 45, or would you like to overfly the airport 500 feet above pattern altitude and observe the windsock?
No, it's that. What's the tetrahedron? What's the thing called?
The wind tetrahedron.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and crash fire rescue standing by, just in case.
We have no clue.
We're
throwing our hands up in the air, which is classic.
There's a guy in Alaska that has assumed something called Overwatch. We don't see that in the pilot controller glossary. Have you heard of it?
A report of a flare coming. Oh, man. Okay.
All right. That's it. Call it quits.
That's good.